Hi, this is Dr. Karen Wilson Starks, your host for the Voice of Leadership, the show for business executives and global corporations who appreciate a principled biblical lens on leadership, featuring the song Consuming Fire by gospel jazz saxophonist Ron McMillan. You are listening to our Resource Renewal Series featuring shows for times such as these. Today, what I want to share with you is what we call our executive success profile. In other words, these are the hallmarks of the successful leader. So if you're really a successful leader, there are 5 things that you are doing in your organization on a regular basis. Number 1, you are leading yourself first. You're developing yourself. And one of the reasons you're developing yourself is because you have to step up into a bigger game to really address the new challenges that are coming your way. So you have to grow, you have to learn, and model that for your organization. So that's number 1, leading yourself first. Number 2 is you also have to develop other successful leaders. So it's almost thinking about yourself as a multiplier. The more you have really well-prepared and excellent leaders around you, they can do a lot more work than what you could do by yourself. So one of the jobs of the successful leader is to develop other successful leaders, which means growing them, providing the development opportunities for them, whether it be in terms of job challenges or also training and other growth kinds of experiences that might be helpful. Thirdly, let's say you've done a lot of work on yourself. You've now done a lot of work on individual leaders. You want to think about what's next for each of them. And you want to start creating a succession process. Now, when I say a succession process, I don't mean necessarily you've got one person sort of earmarked and targeted for a specific job. However, what you're looking at is what are the potential jobs that you need in the company and the organization in the future to achieve the work in the future, and what are the gifts and talents of the people you have right now, and perhaps one person might be appropriate to be considered for multiple positions. So you're always looking at where's the match between the talent that I have right now and either opportunities that exist today or ones that might exist in the future. Then fourthly, you're thinking about how can I launch and develop high-performance teams throughout the organization, because it's really these high-performance teams that do all the bulk of the work of your company. And you want to have as many of those high-performance teams operating as possible. And the reason I've focused a little bit on the individual development side first is that for a team to be high performance, each individual member has got to be operating at a level of excellence in what they do. Once you've got a number of these high-performance teams operating, you're also now thinking about creating what I call a success culture. What needs to be dialed into the culture so that people can succeed regularly on a routine basis, and perhaps there are some barriers that also need to be removed for that success culture to really work. That's really the framework that we use for thinking about the hallmarks of the successful leader. Another way to envision it is to imagine a Venn diagram. So I want you to envision in your mind 3 concentric circles overlapping. And maybe one of those circles is what we call selection. You want to have the right people in your organization in the right positions, and you want to have some mechanisms and some tools in place in order to get the right selection. So selection is one of the circles. Next, you might have another circle, which is the individual development and integration. So you're developing people, you're integrating them into your organization, you're thinking about succession with them. That's circle number 2. Third circle is the team development part. That's the part I mentioned about the high performance teams and really being able to launch and develop now, not just individuals, but teams of people. The sweet spot that's in the middle of these three and where they overlap is what we call the success culture. So that's another way to see and visualize what we are talking about. So, in order for you to get the most out of this podcast today, I'd like to invite you and your team to do a self assessment. And the self assessment is designed to help you figure out how you can get more leaders empowered for dynamic organizational results. So, ask yourself this question. Number one, where are you on the 5 hallmarks of a successful leader? That's leading yourself first, that's developing other individual leaders into great successes. 3 is creating the succession process. 4 is launching and developing high performance teams. And 5 is creating a success culture. So, where are you on those 5? How robust is your success profile? What is it that you need to add or possibly to refine? What help do you need to get to the next level? Because here's what I've discovered over the years is that the transformation is really not even just in the assessment, but it's really in the action that you take, as well as some other insights that I really didn't have time to go into in this podcast. However, if you are the president of a mid or large size company, or you're a senior business leader responsible for launching high performance teams or creating a success culture, then I invite you to a deeper and more personalized conversation with me that really will be focused on getting more leaders empowered for dynamic organizational results at your organization. So I look forward to hearing from you. Today, I'm here with Terrence Chapman, the president and CEO of nonprofit organization Victorious Family. They are committed to family discipleship and transformation. Thank you for being here, Terrence. Tell us about your big goal, what it is that you're going for at Victorious Family.
Well, by 2030, we see reaching 9.2 million families here in the U.S.
That is wonderful. And you're reaching these families because you really want to see children grow up and truly continue their faith in Christ. So tell us about one of your resources, Do Your Children Believe, the book you've written?
Well, Ephesians 6:4 says, Fathers, don't exasperate your children, but to bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So we're just being faithful to that calling. In order to do that, we train coaches and we provide workshops and content to train parents on how to disciple their children.
That is phenomenal. So, how can people find out more about the ministry and the other tools and resources you have available, and also how they can donate to support the ministry?
Well, one of those tools is Do Your Children Believe, a book that we've published by Thomas Nelson. And you can find that at victoriousfamily.org.
Fantastic. All right, so there you have it. You want your family to be victorious? Go to victoriousfamily.org. In today's episode, I'm really going to be talking about how important it is to see that future before it materializes. And those of you who have been listening to the podcast, you will know that in many episodes of The Voice of Leadership, I talk about historical figures, business leaders, or others who had to first see the future before it actually became a reality. So I'm first going to share a couple of stories from my life, from my parents. So first of all, let me share what I learned from my father. My father was born in the deep rural south of Virginia, into great poverty, actually. He was actually born on a slave plantation. And my great grandparents were actually enslaved on that plantation. And my father came to Baltimore after he graduated high school. When he got to Baltimore, he saw that Black men could do jobs like drive buses and operate streetcars. And you have to remember that back at this time, there were a lot of limitations on what Black people were able to do. And so when he saw that, he decided that one day he wanted to be a bus driver or perhaps a streetcar operator. Now, here was his reality. At the time he had this vision and this purpose, he did not have a driver's license. He didn't have a car. he didn't know how to drive, and he didn't know the city. So he was dreaming something that, from a practical point of view, would seem to be impossible. So he started out in Baltimore holding a number of different jobs along the way to get to his goal. On the surface, many of those jobs that he held would seem to have nothing to do with driving. But here's one of the things I want you to keep in mind. That doesn't matter. Once you set the intention for what it is you're doing in the future, everything along the way is going to be meaningful and have value. Now, eventually, he did get a job where he was driving a taxi cab. So when he got the job driving a taxi cab, and mind you, prior to that, he had to learn from my maternal grandmother how to drive. So my maternal grandmother taught him how to drive. So he learned to drive this taxi cab, and the taxi company was very good at giving their employees information about driving under adverse conditions, like how do you drive in the snow? What do you do when this happens and that happens? And of course, he knew nothing about that. So a lot of drivers would take these notes and just throw them away. But my father read every last one of them, and he implemented this information into his moving forward plan. So he learned to be a safe and very good driver, and he also learned the city by driving the taxi cab. So later in life, he had an opportunity then to become a bus driver for what was then called the Baltimore Transit Company. And he had really wanted to be a streetcar operator, but again, divine providence really helps. It's a good thing he went into driving the bus because the streetcars eventually went out of business. So anyway, he drove the bus, did that for a number of years, and because he was very committed to excellence, he was always acknowledged and recognized for moving forward. So he became a supervisor of the bus drivers. He later became a superintendent, and later he was the head of all operations and planning for the Metropolitan Transit Administration in Maryland. That was a very high level job. It was an executive job at that point, and he got there from the ground up because he saw a reality before it even made sense to think about doing something. So he saw himself driving when he didn't know how to drive and didn't have a license. So that's what I learned from my father. Now, I learned something very similar from my mother. My mother, who was from Baltimore, when I was a young child, she decided that she was going to become a nurse. And what I remember her enrolling in school, and I remember her studying day and night. I can still see pictures in my mind of these very technical textbooks that she had with all kinds of medical procedures in them. And she had to really apply herself, but she wanted to be a nurse. Now, what was interesting about my mother's passion for nursing, it really fit with who she was as a person. My mother was the type of person who was deeply committed to helping others. She was a natural healer. So, being a natural healer, this future that she envisioned for herself, very much aligned with her gifts and with her talents. So, later, when I saw her in her nursing uniform with the nurse's hat, and she was graduating, that was a great day. And back at that time, when nurses went to work, they actually had to wear the white uniform, they had the white shoes, they had the nursing hat, and every night she was polishing her white shoes with the white polish. But I remember in childhood, my mother really was a natural herbalist. She was always in the kitchen whipping up concoctions designed to help heal us from different conditions. And I tell you what, sometimes you wished you would get well before you had to take the treatment because they didn't always taste great. Nevertheless, somehow or another, she nursed us back to health. And even in my case, even in adulthood, when I was active duty in the Army, I was one of those people who just didn't do well with pharmaceuticals. And in the Army, we were required every year to take the flu shot. Every year, I got drastically ill for 3 weeks with a horrific strain of the flu immediately after the flu shot. And I would come within an inch of my life, and my mother would come to wherever I was living and nurse me back to health. And of course, since I've gotten out of the Army, I have avoided the flu shot and haven't caught the flu at all. So there are just some of us who just don't do well with that. But anyway, my mother, she envisioned her future that aligned with her gifts and talents, and that's how she became successful. So, in my book, Lead Yourself First, the Senior Leader's Guide to Engaging Your People for Greater Performance and Impact, you will see the full story about my own journey of becoming a clinical psychologist and a consultant and an Army officer and all of that, and how that story was birthed from the sixth grade. So please stay tuned, go to the book, and read up on that. And here's a few things I want you to notice is that even in my story, as with my parents, and as will be the case with you, there will be challenges. There will be obstacles to overcome. Nevertheless, though, challenges don't stop the vision, they don't stop the journey. So it takes perseverance to see what's beyond, to see beyond what's even blocking the view. So just imagine that there's this beautiful lake oasis on the backside of the mountain, but all you can see is the mountain in front of you. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So there are a couple of principles I want you to take away from today's episode, and that is number one, commit to the vision first. So first you want to make that commitment. Secondly, then you watch as the resources come to you to make that dream happen. And that includes even the financial resources. And then thirdly, know that every experience is preparing you for your future. And when I mention the backside of the mountain, it makes me think about Moses in the Bible because he knew he was called to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt and out of slavery. However, he got ahead of himself and killed the Egyptian, and God had to put him out on the backside of the mountain for about 40 years of preparation, where he was learning some humility, he was learning some patience, and how to be a husband, how to raise a family. Then he came back to do the mission for which he was actually called. So here's some questions for you to think about for yourself. What are your gifts and talents as a leader? What's the vision that you have for your impact in the workplace? How will you benefit others and your workplace when that vision is realized? So I invite you to go to Amazon and get your copy of Lead Yourself First, the Senior Leader's Guide to Engaging Your People for Greater Performance and Impact. And remember, you are here not only to serve you, but to serve others, just as we are. So get a copy for someone else too, or maybe several someone else's along the way who you think could benefit from envisioning their future even before they can see it. Thank you and have a great day. Hi, this is Dr. Karen Wilson Starks, and I am with Pastor Ben Anderson, the Executive Director of Solid Rock Community Development Corporation, and they are doing fabulous works in the Southeast community of Colorado Springs. And one of the initiatives is the Food Security Initiative, and we know how important it is for families and children to have healthy food. So, Pastor Ben, tell us what you're doing.
We operate in a food desert, and one of our initiatives is the food security program, which we have. We serve approximately 2,500 residents per month that go through our food center. We have a drive-through the second Friday of every month. We're currently in the process of building an aquapod farm the land has been donated to us by a school district. The aquapod farm will produce enough produce that we can serve our residents and serve our restaurants also that operate in Southeast Colorado Springs.
You know, Pastor Ben, some people may not know what an aquapod farm is. Can you say a brief word about that?
The aquapod farm is how you grow produce with fish and water. When there's a lack of land in urban areas, most cities are turning now to aquapod farms to grow produce without the benefit of having land.
Thank you so much, Pastor Ben, for sharing with us what you're doing. You're doing great work to encourage health in the Southeast Colorado Springs community. And those of you listening, if you want to donate and participate, go to solidrockcdc.com. That's solidrockcdc.com. Let me ask you something. When was the last time that you took some quiet time just to think? Remember, executives need strategic thinking time. And one of the reasons that you hire people to work in your business is so that you have time to work on your business and to lead your business. So, what's the danger? What's the challenge? When you work too deep in your business, your vision is limited because you're up to your neck in alligators. And when you're working on your business, you get to have the 50,000-foot view, which helps you to lead and steer better because you can see where you're going. So, this strategic thinking time away from the day to day operations is necessary to have that view. So, I want to share with you what some of my clients are doing in order to get that time. I have some clients that go to Starbucks, and that's a place they might spend even as much as half a day so that they can think strategically, be outside of the office, and plan. Some other clients go to Barnes and Noble, and that's where they have their strategic thinking time. Others go to the library. One of my personal favorites, I like to go to conferences because in conferences, I'm hearing interesting and new information, and I am applying it to my own business in a unique way. And it may be very different from what the speaker is saying. However, because of my own creativity, I'm able to weave a tapestry out of it that works for me when I get back to the office. And then the fifth way that people are creating this space is with their own executive coach and trusted advisor. So when you are in these spaces, what is it that you can do? You can think of your future vision. You can think of your goals and your objectives. You can read relevant articles and books for inspiration and ideas. You can even spend some time journaling your thoughts or setting your priorities. Here's what you want to know is that without this special strategic thinking time, you miss opportunities and you might get stuck in the quicksand of the organizational panic. Maybe your organization will feel leaderless or rudderless because there's no direction and they're wondering who's at the helm. Are we going to hit an iceberg? Because you too are submerged underwater with them. So you want to spend some time gaining this perspective so you can lead more effectively. And since I mentioned that number 5, you can create this time with your trusted advisor. I have some clients who say that's really the only time they get to think about the big picture, the strategic issues in their organizations, or to identify what they need to address or what to work on is the time that we carve out together because their schedules are so busy. So if you want some accountability in creating your strategic thinking time, to spend that time with me for the benefit of both yourself as the executive leader and also your business, then I'm very pleased to speak with you more about what that looks like. Hi, it's Dr. Karen here, reminding you that change is very challenging and difficult, even under the best of circumstances. If you are going through an organizational change, it goes better when you know the steps, the order of the steps, and what to do. So contact me to walk through what will work best for your organization. I can be reached at Dr. Dr. Karen, Karen, at transleadership.com. I have many clients who are visionaries. And some of those visionary clients are executives who are not necessarily the president, the CEO, or the business owner. And for a population of those executives who are not presidents and CEOs, they're in conservative organizations or perhaps more pedantic sort of organizations that may not like new things too often. Of course, that's very challenging if you're a visionary because you're always seeing new things on the horizon. So, in those situations, my visionary clients find that influence is really a challenge. So, I've got 5 things I want you to think about. If you find that you are that visionary at work and people just don't seem to hear you or to listen or to see what you see. So, number one, remember, you are the visionary, others are not. This means that being visionary is your superpower. What's easy and what's obvious to you and for you is often hidden and veiled to other people. They don't see what you see because they don't have that same x ray vision. So stop expecting them to see it. You are the one with x ray vision. This point is very important about remembering that you are the visionary and that it's your superpower. A lot of frustrations can actually be avoided by remembering that what's easy for you is not necessarily easy for others. Number two, when you are sharing what you do see on the horizon as the visionary, and when you are sharing a direction that you think would be helpful or useful for the organization to go in, remember to show the evidence. Bring the evidence so others can go along on the journey with you. Although you don't need the binoculars, they do. So bring the binoculars so they can look through them and see what you can see with the naked eye. Number three, empower other influencers and early adopters in the organization. People who may be less myopic than perhaps even the senior most leaders in the organization. Yet there are other executives and there are other people who are placed in key roles. Empower them to see what you see so that you're building now a coalition of other influencers and early adopters. Then, number four, what you want to do is set the ball up for those other influencers and let them carry the message. Sometimes those other people may speak the language of the president and CEO better than you do. Most visionaries that I know get so frustrated because people don't see what they see and don't hear the message. They then become very emotional, and the message gets lost in those emotions. And when the message gets lost, the people who are kind of blind to the vision, they're even less likely to see it. So imagine yourself as a volleyball player, and you're a great volleyball player, yet you don't hit all the balls over the net yourself. There are times you set that ball up for the next person or another person. Think about building capacity throughout your team of influencers so that you don't have to put every ball over the net. And number five, don't get mad when your organization finally gets what you are talking about. Maybe it's 10 years later. Maybe you've lost some ground financially in the organization. Maybe you've lost a marketing opportunity. Maybe a whole bunch of things have happened because they didn't listen earlier. And of course, as the visionary, you're sitting there thinking, oh, if only you had paid attention. I told you this was coming. Instead, when they finally get it and when they finally see it, here's what you can do: celebrate and then move into action. Remember, this is your day, the day you've been waiting for. You saw it first because you're a visionary, and they are now listening. Take action more than sit on the train tracks in resentment. They need you now more than ever because you're still more visionary and you still see more about the next steps than they probably do. And on the days when you're feeling maybe discouraged about this role, I want you to remember the prophet Jeremiah in the Bible. Jeremiah was referred to as the weeping prophet. He was the weeping prophet because he was always carrying bad news. He was carrying bad news to Judah. He was warning the people for years to repent of all the wrongdoing they were doing in the land, or God was going to bring judgment on the people. And it didn't matter how often Jeremiah preached the message, how eloquently he preached the message, or what object lessons he used, the people would not listen to him. He even reminded them of what happened to the tribes of Israel earlier when they were taken off into captivity by the Assyrians. However, they still didn't listen. They had false prophets who said, "Oh, those bad things aren't going to happen. Why is Jeremiah always against us and bringing bad news?" The people were swayed by the false prophets. They rebelled against what Jeremiah said. And in fact, they wanted to kill Jeremiah. And sometimes you might feel like that in the organization, that when you're bringing that visionary perspective, people just want to stop you. They want you to shut up. They don't get it. And it feels like they want to kill you and your message. However, Jeremiah realized he still had to keep speaking the message no matter the consequences. And sometimes he was imprisoned for speaking that message. Sometimes he was put in a dungeon for speaking that message. And yet he had to speak it anyway. And ultimately, the people refused to listen to the point that the Babylonians really did come and take them into captivity. A remnant was left in Jerusalem. Jeremiah was with them, and they asked Jeremiah, "What should we do?" He sought God on their behalf, and God said, "Don't go down to Egypt. Don't think you're going to be safe in Egypt. Stay here, and I will take care of you in this location." But again, the people wouldn't listen. They went down to Egypt, and as God had prophesied, they were killed in Egypt because that's not where they were supposed to be at the time. Now, earlier in Jeremiah's ministry, God had a little talk with him to encourage him. And he said to him, "If you have run with the footmen and they have wearied you, then how can you contend with horses? If in the land of peace in which you trusted, they wearied you, then how will you do in the floodplain of the Jordan?" That's Jeremiah 12:5. Wow, think about that. If you have a hard time during the easy times, then what are you going to do when the heat is really turned up? So just remember, when you're a visionary, similar to Jeremiah, everybody won't get it, everybody won't listen, everybody won't act or respond at the right time. And yet, your message is important because somebody at some point is likely to hear it and implement it. And you will be the person of the hour for a time such as this. So don't get weary in your well doing as a visionary. Your superpower is needed in the workplace, even if people act as though it is not. So be encouraged and continue to talk about the vision. Did you know that teams do the bulk of the work in successful organizations? And for this reason, it's very important to build and develop your teams. And first, you might want to know where you are in the process. So I invite you to take the complimentary team assessment to identify your current strengths and also your learning opportunities in launching and developing high performance teams that get dynamic organizational results. So go to my website, www.transleadership.com, and you'll see on the homepage there's a brown bar that says, Take the High Performance Team Assessment. You'll find it just under the running photographs. Click there and get your results. Today, we are talking about leaving a powerful leadership legacy. And the real question is, how will you leave things in your organization when you are no longer there? And kind of in the spirit of Stephen Covey when he said, begin with the end in mind, what I would say to you is this: it is never too early to start thinking about the legacy that you are leaving. For one thing, every action and every step that you're taking today is creating that legacy. So if you wait until the last minute, you may leave something different than what you really wanted to leave or what you intended. So, kind of like keeping a Girl Scout and Boy Scout principle in mind, we want to leave a place better than we found it. Now, since most of my clients are senior leaders, they are actually thinking about legacy. However, some of them are on that fast moving hamster wheel and they have a hard time taking time to really give it the energy it needs to think through the legacy pieces. So, I want to just share a couple of aspects about this that may be helpful to you as you think about the powerful leadership legacy that you might leave. So, there are three areas that I think are important to at least think about. Number one is choosing who you are as a leader, how you are leading, and what impact that has on others. So, for example, in my own personal case, as I think about working with my clients, there are at least three things that I am certain they would share with you about how I work with them. Number one is they would see me as a person who brings a sense of vision and inspiration about what is possible. So that's one way I'm leading. I'm bringing vision, inspiration, and this possibility thinking. Number two, they know that I'm going to build on their strengths and to approach whatever the issue is from a positive perspective. And then thirdly, they know that I'm going to prepare them and help them prepare for real life scenarios by practicing those situations in advance. So these three pieces are actually hallmarks of how I lead with my clients. And so I want you to think about what are the kind of hallmarks, defining features of how you show up at work that you want people to be able to articulate about you when they think about you as a leader. Number two, it's about creating a sustainable culture. And when I think about a sustainable culture, there's several components to that. One, that culture is one that's feedback rich because we know that feedback is really that food that people need every day. They need feedback about what's going well so they can continue making that happen. And they also need feedback about anything that's causing an issue, causing a problem, or that needs to be changed so that that can be shifted and better results can be dialed in. And then secondly, in the sustainable culture, you want a learning focus, a focus where people are invited every day to learn something new and to learn something different and put that into operation. And then the third piece of sustainable culture would be collaborating and co-creating together. In other words, it's an organization because you have more than one person. And if you have more than one person, you want to have the benefit of multiple people through collaboration and co-creation. Otherwise, I could just be in the company by myself and just do my own thing. But I have my partners and others there because when we collaborate and co-create together, we're creating a more sustainable culture for the future. So you want to think about, number one, who you are as a leader and what characterizes your leadership. Number two, what characterizes sustainable culture, how you can build that in feedback rich, learning focus, collaboration, co creation, and whatever else you might want to dial in. And then thirdly, you want to be developing other people. And as we've talked about in other podcasts before, developing individuals and also developing teams. And we'll speak a little bit more about that in the future. However, each person who's in your organization, they need to learn and grow as a result of being there. And your teams also have to be launched and developed. So you want to think about, what does that look like? And what legacy are you going to leave on those fronts? Now, the bottom line is that you are actually in a relay of sorts. And it's going to be your job at some point to pass that baton on to the next person, because you're not going to be around forever. So if you think about passing the baton, or if you think about, let's say, even if you are turning over the keys to this house that you've lived in for a long time to the next owner, the new owners, what condition do you want that house to be in when you turn the keys over? Hopefully, you're not handing them a big, huge mess. So there are a couple of things to think about in that passing the baton or handing the keys over. And I want to mention what those few things are. So number one, you want to think about, what is it in this house that needs to be fixed? What is it that needs to be repaired, so that you can begin fixing and repairing those things before you're giving the house to the next owner? Number two, what are some of the things that need to be built? Maybe it doesn't exist yet. Maybe you're adding on a sunroom to the house. Maybe you are adding an additional guest bathroom. I mean, there's something you're building into the infrastructure of your business and your organization that doesn't exist today. However, it's going to be important for the future and the opportunities of the future. So that's number two. And then number three, who needs to be recruited to be a part of this effort, and who might need to be weeded out? So often I see leaders passing the baton or passing the keys on, and they've left someone in the organization who's very destructive and who's very problematic. And now the new person coming on board has got to deal with someone who probably should have been downsized out of the organization maybe years ago. So you don't want to leave unnecessary messes for people. So just in review, number one, you want to identify what needs to be fixed and repaired so you can begin working on that. Number two, what needs to be built so you can be building. Who needs to be recruited for that future, bringing those people in, and who needs to be weeded out, getting rid of that riffraff, so to speak, so that the person coming in has got a good team with whom to work. Now, even though you are passing this house on in good condition, so to speak, and with some of these aspects thought about and implemented, it doesn't mean that you are fixing everything that needs to be fixed. There are some items that you are leaving for the next person to do, and you want to be able to articulate what that is. So what are you leaving for them to work on? Does the roof need to be fixed? And maybe they need to add a roof. Do they need to finish the basement? There's something you're leaving for them to do. And keep in mind, you want them to have also a next step leadership agenda. So everything doesn't have to be already done. Everything doesn't have to be perfect, because if it did, you'd never be able to leave. So it's okay to leave something, but be intentional about what you're doing and what you're leaving as your leadership legacy. Hi, this is Dr. Karen here today, and I want to share some important insights with you about Spirit Wings Kids Foundation, a 501(c)(3) organization that's doing wonders across the globe and especially in Uganda. And today I have with me Donna Johnson, who's the founder of Spirit Wings Kids and a member of the board. And today she's going to tell us about the permaculture farm that they have started. Donna, tell us all about it.
Thank you, Dr. Karen. For decades, we've been supporting the Orphanage and Family Network in Uganda. And in 2018, my son is a permaculturist, and we had acres that we dedicated to his planting. And it was just amazing. And he also taught them how to do permaculture, and it's flourishing. In fact, during the pandemic, it saved lives. 203 families were fed during the pandemic. And so it's such a miracle that God just called us to plant that garden at the time that we did.
Thank you so much, Donna. Thank you so much for your work in Uganda. And a couple of other things I want people to know. As a permaculture farm is self-contained in many ways, depending on how they're growing the crops. You don't have to use pest control. You don't need fertilizer. It's a very sustainable way to provide food for the community. And so that's a blessing. So if you want to be a part of this wonderful work out there, 100% of all of your donation goes to the people in Uganda to help feed them and their families. So go to swkids.foundation and give today. Make a difference in the world. And thank you for doing so. Integrity in business is always important. And yet, what I want to talk about today is the importance of integrity now. When we talk about integrity, we're talking about having a strong ethical compass and operating by moral principles. It's the ability to act with honesty, with honor, with truthfulness. It's being trustworthy and it's being kind. Integrity is doing what's right, even if no one is watching, even if it's not convenient, even if it costs you, and even if it's hard. People of integrity are people who fulfill their obligations. They help other people who are in need. They respect others. They demonstrate humility, which means they recognize the strengths that they have and they have confidence in those strengths. At the same time, they're also willing to see where they have development needs and still need to grow. People who have integrity readily admit mistakes and their faults, and they're willing to apologize. People of integrity are credible, they're believable, they're consistent in what they do. They're the kind of people that you can say about them, what you see is what you get. If we think about the word integrity and we look at its Latin roots, we see the word integer. And integer stands for wholeness or complete. So a person of integrity is a person who is a complete kind of a person. They're whole and wholesome. My three siblings and I were spending some time with my father, and we were honoring him and giving him tribute for how he's lived his life before us. And as we were having that conversation together, my sister reminded all of us and our father that one of the number one principles that she most valued and respected in my father is that he was a man of integrity. And she said this was one of the central tenets or descriptors about him. And as she was sharing with us and telling us some of the stories, my father is retired from the bus company in his city. As a result of that, he has a free pass. He can ride any bus and any subway at any time free of charge, and it's lifetime. So sometimes if he was going somewhere with my sister and she was with him, and the gate attendant said, "Oh, well, she can come in free too." My father said, "No, she's not entitled to the privilege." And he would always pay for her because it was the right thing and the ethical thing to do. My sister also remembered that he wouldn't even bring home pens and pencils from the office. He was very honest, even in the small things. So later, when I was speaking with my father about this, and we were reminiscing about his upbringing and his past as well, he said he always wanted to be that live example to us as his children and to model before us how to live and also what we should do. And I remember that he said he learned these same principles from his mother. His family was very, very poor. However, his mother raised them in this way. She says, never steal. Don't be a criminal. Those words stuck in his mind. She was the one who implored him daily to be an honest person, to be a person of integrity. And somehow, even in their deepest poverty, sometimes a neighbor would send something over. In any case, basic needs did get met so that they survived. So when I think about businesses in this current time, there are a lot of temptations in the workplace today as companies are considering the recession that's caused by the pandemic, and they're thinking about who are they going to lay off? Who might get promoted instead? Who is going to get a raise? Who might get a bonus? As they're asking those questions, there can be the temptation to answer and to favor those who are your friends, those who are like you, those who you want to favor, and maybe not always be as fair to someone else. When you have power, that brings a lot of access. And we see in today's world many politicians, for example, who get into that position of power and access often end up doing things that lack in integrity. And ultimately, when brought to light and when they are caught, they have then ruined their reputations. So we all, in some scenarios, have the opportunity to do the wrong thing and to take what doesn't belong to us. And the question is, what do you do when faced with those opportunities? So, in the business scenario right now, what does fair look like? Who's really going to get the severance packages? How much will they be? How long will they last? Will there be differences between people? And what are those differences based on? So, if you are a person who has shown integrity in these tough times, people will still believe you. If you have shown integrity in the good times and now it's a tough time, they're going to imagine that you still will be consistent with the principles that you have always lived by. People see you, they watch you, and your actions send a signal. Whatever it is that you do and whatever it is that you allow, just remember you get more of what you allow and more of what you practice. And you may think that others don't know. However, somehow they always manage to find out, and they will follow suit even if you never say a word about it. So, when you are a person who's fair and a person of integrity, even if people don't like the outcomes, like maybe I'm one of the ones who's going to get laid off, if I have confidence that you are a fair person of integrity, then I'm much more likely to accept that decision, knowing in my mind, I'm sure you've done everything that you can think of And this is just the best alternative out of many difficult alternatives. So I say to you out there today, if you want an organization that's built on ethics, built on principles, and an organization of integrity, make sure that you too are a person of integrity. You are the instrument of your leadership. And so I invite you to read a complimentary chapter of my book, Lead Yourself First, the Senior Leader's Guide to Engaging Your People for Greater Performance and Impact. And here's what you'll get from reading the book. You'll get some perspectives on how to leverage your unique gifts and superpowers, also how to mine the gold of your past experiences overcoming challenges, and thirdly, you'll be able to identify the continual learning that will catapult you to your next victory. So, to read that complimentary chapter, go to my website, www.transleadership.com, scroll down the homepage, and click on the button that says Read a Chapter. And I look forward to meeting you inside the book. Thank you for listening to The Voice of Leadership with me, Dr. Karen Wilson Starks. I am also your concierge executive leadership advisor for when you need to make tough business decisions, facilitate executive succession and transition, develop your executive team, lead change, create a positive and profitable culture, or leverage marketplace creative advantage. You can reach me at Dr. Karen, Karen, at transleadership.com. Also go to my website, transleadership.com, for more leadership resources and insights. I want to give special thanks to Ron McMillan, gospel jazz saxophonist and national Billboard recording artist, also known as Mr. Sirius XM Jazz Watercolors, for allowing us to use his gifted music on our show. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.